Okay, it's week 27, and this is our second week in our summer playground month. This week we're building the frozen watermelon margarita. And the star of the show this week is not actually the watermelon, it's the blender itself. Because making a blended cocktail is not about throwing all of your ingredients and pressing the blend. It's about keeping the balance before it goes in. And in fact, this week's lesson is mostly about the water. Whoosh. But first, a bit of history. This drink dates back to a very specific date of May 11th, 1971, where Mariano Martinez had his place serving frozen margaritas, but couldn't quite get the consistency right. Sometimes they came out a little bit too icy, sometimes they came out a little bit too watery, and it really bugged him. He tried to think of a solution when one day he noticed some young lads enjoying a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. That was the day he bought a soft ice cream, soft serve, whatever it's called, and he converted it into a margarita machine. Got the consistency dialed in exactly right, and it became so popular that today that machine is actually sitting in the Smithsonian. So while we're gonna build this drink today with a homemade blender, we're still after what Mariano was after, which is that smooth, consistent, slushy output. Whoosh. Okay, so what's in this drink? Well, at the heart, this is a margarita, which we've already done this year. So you have your mostly 2-1-1 ratio, your tequila, your lime, your touch of sweetness, but let's go into each one, okay? Tequila, as always, is our backbone spirit. The tequila is made from agave, which already brings this sweet earthiness flavor before anything else hits the drink. The lime is the citrus that will balance and just pair so well with its tequila counterparts. And of course, the sweet, often found in the orange liqueur, or as we're gonna build, at least I'm gonna build today, the Tommy's Margarita version, will help to just even out that citrus and tequila, which makes the margarita and the salt rim just frankly the most perfect drink, I think. But let's talk about the watermelon in the room, and obviously that is bringing this summer slushy fun, but what's important is that watermelon is made up of almost 90% water. This matters in the dilution process, which we're gonna get to right now. Whoosh. Okay, here's the core lesson of this week. Shaking a normal margarita, shaking any shaken cocktail drink, is doing two things. Much like stirring, but even more so, you are chilling the drink down, making it cold, but you are also diluting the ice. Putting that ice into a blender is going to dilute it even more. Add to that a water-forward fruit like watermelon, and you're gonna end up with a thin, watery, bland mess. So, what's the trick? The trick is you want the watermelon to do double duty. You actually don't add any ice, but instead you freeze your watermelon chunks. Here we have about 2 cups of pre-cut watermelon, and you wanna freeze it overnight. You could be fancy in freezing it into a tray so they don't touch each other, so you don't end up with one big block of watermelon ice like I did, and then you can transfer them over into a bag for when you're ready, or if you're like me, just, put it in a bowl, freeze it, and then hope for the best. So the watermelon actually will thicken the drink, but because it's frozen, it's gonna act as our ice also, adding that chillness, but more importantly, adding the right dilution so we end up with a well-balanced drink. Whoosh. Okay, glassware, we're gonna serve this in a margarita glass or a rocks glass or a highball, which is what I have here. Some say not to chill the glass because it's more difficult to rim, but I chilled this, so we'll see how that goes. So first we're gonna rim it. That's our garnish. It's kind of our last step usually, but this is our first step for a margarita. I'm gonna do 2 variations. So I'm going to have tagine on one side, and then I'm gonna put regular old salt on the other side, which is a mix of coarse and fine salt. And what I like about this is this actually gives you the option of which flavor profile you want as you drink. The salt is arguably more important in the frozen drink because one thing to note, and this comes into play with the watermelon as well, anything frozen, including ice cream, which is a bit mind-blowing, actually dulls the sweet and it also dulls the sour. It mutes these extreme tastes, which is why ice cream is actually even more sweet. If you just let ice cream defrost and drink it, it'll taste way sweeter than it is in its cold ice form. So what's important to get, first of all, the salt will just help to bring some of that punchy taste back, but your watermelon also should be on the sweet end. Now, of course, that's all over the place. There's watermelons that are, a good batch. There's watermelons that are super sweet. So to counteract this balance, you always want to taste from the blender and add watermelon accordingly. Again, it's just something to keep in mind. When something is frozen, when something is ice, it actually mutes the flavor. You need to add even more flavor than you ordinarily would. Whoosh. Okay, so into our blender. We're doing 2 ounces of tequila blanco, white tequila. And again, this is the same as a regular margarita, but instead of putting in an ounce of orange liqueur, I'm gonna go the Tommy's Margarita version, which does away with the orange liqueur and instead has an ounce of agave. This will keep the sweet, but I fear the orange is going to conflict with the watermelon. And you can experiment, let me know how that goes. I kinda don't want to experiment with that. So we have our 2-1-1, so we're gonna do 1 ounce of fresh squeezed lime juice. And the Tommy's is a half an ounce, not a full ounce, a half an ounce. Oh, this is a new agave. This is a real cooking show when I'm actually opening the things, This is not just put it in the oven, take it out of the oven. This is real life, folks. Okay. Half an ounce, oh yeah, of that agave. You could cut it with a little bit of warm water to help with the viscosity. I'm just gonna give it a second instead. Okay, now I'm gonna break my watermelon blob and just throw that in. You want 2 cups of frozen watermelon. How to measure 2 cups of frozen pieces of watermelon? I do not know. So I asked my wife, I said, is this 2 cups? And she took 1 piece out and she said, yes. I don't know, it looks like too much. I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave some pieces. That looks like 2 cups to me. Okay. When you're blending and it's too thick, you could either use a tamper if your blender comes with it, or put in a splash of water just to get it going. If you find it's too watery, don't add ice, add frozen watermelon. Okay, so now we're gonna blend it now. Okay, we hear it blending. This is good, looking good. And okay, so that looks blended enough. You can see the blender did a really good job here. And I did it very quickly so you didn't see, but I actually did use the tamper that my Vitamix comes with, which is an excellent blender. I think the modern day Ninjas and whatnots are of similar caliber. I don't even know how this is gonna come out because this is totally slushed up. I'm afraid it's gonna all come out in one lump. Okay, so we're gonna take our bar spoon and just break it up a little bit so it comes out in a responsible way. Cooey. Okay, all right, some of it went into the glass there. Let's just get rid of that, a little bit of movie magic here. All right, let's just make that look a little bit nicer. And we have a garnish of a lime. And there we have it, folks. The frozen watermelon margarita. All right, well, don't mind the mess. I'm sure it's good. I'm first gonna taste the no salt version because I'm just curious what's going on here in the drink. Cheers. Okay. This is actually too good in its slushiness. Perhaps you could take note in my experimentation here, because this is not drinkable without a straw. But with a straw, you're not getting the rim. So I either needed to frost this a bit or in the mix. Okay, we'll do this right. I'm gonna put it back in the blender. I'm gonna add a touch of water, gonna loosen it up a bit, and then we're gonna pour it back in. All right, no harm, no foul. Okay, we are at-home bartenders here, and I think I was really going for perfection of what Mariano is after. And it was indeed slushy, but it was too slushy. So I guess if it's really not blending where you have to use a tamper stick, maybe just add water instead, and it's going to be a better result anyways. So as I said, here is your frozen watermelon margarita. All right, let's see if we could drink this now. Okay. That is much better than I thought it would be. Got this beard problem. I need another sip because that is, margarita is one of my favorite drinks. So, it does make sense I would like this, but that is the most delicious watermelon slushy drink I've ever had. Okay, we're gonna take off the garnish because I'm really curious to try the tagine side. So the tagine spice really gives it a completely different feel. Okay, I'm getting a little bit of a head rush. A brain freeze. Let me try the salt side. The salt is a little less exciting, in my opinion. I personally would do half tagine, half nothing. It's an exceptional drink. It is super refreshing. It actually really works, the watermelon and the tequila. I wasn't sure it would. I don't know why, because it's a pretty popular drink. But this is actually the first time I've had a proper frozen margarita. If you go to a resort or a pool or something and you order one, it's gonna be just full of sugar. It's not gonna be this nuanced, properly balanced margarita. I definitely get some tequila on the back end. I'm quite intrigued with the tagine, which tells me that perhaps one of the variations, which we're about to get to, of using mezcal instead of regular white tequila base would probably pair well. I would be very intrigued with a mezcal watermelon margarita, because you don't think that these things go together until you try it, which is really a really fun part of making cocktails in general. Which brings us to our variations. Let's see what the interwebs have to say. Okay, so it's saying tagine gets you a bit of spice, but if you want to lean into that even more, some fresh jalapenos in the blend will make it a spicy drink, which honestly, I could kind of see. When I read that at first, it didn't make any sense to me, but drinking it now with the tagine, look, it's definitely a different drink, and definitely the watermelon tastes as expected. It's sweet, refreshing, and light with tequila on the back end, kind of a margarita meets 7-Eleven slushy, which I guess was Mariano's point. But the spice and the kick, and the salt for that matter, actually pairs well with the drink's components. So you could lean into that with an ancho reyes, a mezcal, jalapeno, kind of not all together, but those kinds of vibes that lean a little bit more into the salt and spice, I think actually would pair well with this drink. Okay, so it's saying, of course it's saying mezcal, so you could do a split base. Half mezcal, half tequila blanco. You could do 1 ounce each. One quick reminder before we close. Next week is the Stoli Doli. Now that requires mostly prep. If you haven't already last week, it's okay. 2 weeks I think is ideal, but 1 week is totally fine. Cut up a pineapple. Put it in a jar, put a bottle of vodka on top of it, close the jar, put it in the fridge, wait a week. Next week, we're gonna take it out and find out what we're gonna do with it. This is a pineapple infused vodka called a Stoli Doli, and that's what we're making next week, but it does need the prep, at least a week. 2 weeks is even better, but I think a week is fine. If you have even less time, then cut it up into smaller chunks. Even after a few days, you'll get an infusion. Me personally, I'm infusing it for 1 week, so we'll see how it goes, but now is the time to do it. Cut up a pineapple, put it in a jar, cover it with vodka, glug, 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 close the jar, put it in the fridge. I give it a mix every few days. I don't think you really have to. Let it infuse at least a week, 1 to 2 weeks. That's next week. But for now, that's a good segue. This is a good place to be. This is an absolutely refreshing drink. I highly recommend. That's week 27. And until next week, happy mixing.